In episode 1, we discussed the idea of separate spheres. Today, we will go more in depth by looking at stereotypes, how suffragists were seen by their detractors, and how women in the movement worked to expand the feminine sphere. If you recall, separate spheres is the idea that women and men had two very distinct parts to play in society. Women were domestic. They stayed at home where they could devote themselves fully to being wives and mothers. This was seen as the height of femininity and womanhood. While women raised families, men went out and took part in public life. They worked, debated, engaged in political activity, and ran the empire. For a woman to step into the public sphere was a big deal. She would face criticism from detractors, and some people would dismiss her with derogatory stereotypes. Members of the suffrage movement, regardless of if they were militant or not, were often negatively cast simply because they dared to voice their political opinions. Instead of letting themselves be defined by these old stereotypes, suffragists worked to create new images in the public's mind. In this episode, we'll listen to some anti-suffrage stereotypes, consider their pro-suffrage responses, and try to determine what exactly a suffragist looked like.
Why shouldn't women have a voice in government? Today's modern girls are far more capable than male society gives us credit for. We are sharp, hard-working and motivated. We don't have husbands to answer to or children to care for, perhaps in the future, but first we must assert ourselves. Long have we suffered the burdens of a patriarchal society treating us in a patronising manner, telling us what we can and cannot do. It is high time that women take control of their own lives, starting with the vote.
What could be more absurd than a woman trying to act like a man? These sad spinsters are everything a lady should not be. They dress in a manner most unbecoming of a lady, with their heavy boots, shapeless jackets, little ties, and pork pie hats. Do they believe that if they look like a man they will get their way? If you can't take up arms to serve your country, you should not vote. They might attack shops and battle policemen here, but they would not last in a real war. We cannot weaken the empire with such foolishness. Perhaps if these suffragettes had homes and families they would be contented, but who would want to marry such a creature?
If we come across as masculine, it is only because we are bold enough to demand our fundamental rights as citizens. We are modern Joan of Arc figures, riding into battle against an unfair government. Like her, we struggle and fight for the good of our nation. We are militant because you would not listen to reason. Believe us when we say that we do not enjoy militancy. Like war, it was only adopted when every peaceable method of settling the question had failed. We will continue to fight until our rights are won. And no, we are not ladylike. But, as we've written many times in our periodicals, isn't it more important to commit breaches of manners if necessary, in the fight to redress the wrongs of women?
Women haven't the mind for politics. They are far too preoccupied with husbands, babies, and the latest fashions. These poor sweet things shouldn't be dragged down by something as burdensome as politics. It's like our former Prime Minister Gladstone said, to give women the vote is to trespass upon their purity, their refinement, the elevation of their whole nature. Politics and government are no place for a lady of virtue. Besides, if women were to enter politics, it would not be the darling creatures we hold so dear running for office. It would be those unpleasant suffragettes.
If you truly believe in our feminine grace and virtues, you would want us in your government. We would be a civilizing influence in the world of politics. As wives and mothers, we maintain a moral influence which we would be able to apply to the state and the empire at large with our vote. Millicent Garrett Fawcett, leader of the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, once wrote, "We do not advocate the representation of women because there is no difference between men and women, but rather because of the difference between them." She could not be more correct. We want the vote because our experiences and knowledge of the home, of raising children, of nurturing, would have a most positive impact on Britain at large.
It's all very fine and good to advocate morality and virtue in politics, but at what expense? If women were to devote themselves to politics, what would become of the home? One way or another, they would end up neglecting their children, choosing political rallies over feeding their little ones. Children would grow up motherless. Fathers would have to intervene and run the household, but they do not know how. Soon the entire family structure would begin to crumble. And what use would be the virtuous influence of politics?
In the words of Charlotte Despard, we belong to the nation as we belong to the family, and in truth the nation is only the larger family because the business carried on by the House of Commons is our business, concerning us and our children as intimately as it concerns the men. You see, we are more than capable of handling the home and the political world. As we've said before, the Empire can only benefit from our nurturing influence. Women cannot weaken Britain, we can only strengthen it.
All kinds of women joined the movement, from factory girls to the landed gentry. Suffragists highlighted the occupational and social diversity within the movement, though it would remain almost entirely white and middle class. By portraying themselves as modern women, they signified the vote as a mark of progress. By boldly claiming their militant status, they took away potential weapons from the antis. By highlighting their virtue and femininity, they fought against claims that they were masculine, as well as the accusation of frivolousness. When they described themselves as mothers of the empire, they appropriated patriarchal imperialist rhetoric. Not all women were mothers, or concerned with morals, or even for complete gender equality. But by creating characters and archetypes for themselves, they were able to practice a level of control over their public perception.